My presentation is about approaches to healthy food policies in schools. What we're looking at how dietary intake of school children affect a student's performance, and how hunger is a major problem. Many children live in poverty, and how unhealthy eating can affect the physical and mental health of a child. And what we're going to do is look at like 3 different policies and do a comparison, implementation, and evaluation as to how a district can use these policies to create successful policies. So in the research that I looked at, we found that dietary habits can influence the cognitive function and other lifelong health effects, and that with poor nutrition there is poor health practices, and both make it harder for children to listen, concentrate, and learn. And we also found that the effects of poor nutrition and health are mostly seen in children of poverty. And it's found that 1 out of 5 children live in poverty, and more than 7 million are in deep poverty. And around 47% are SNAP participants that are children under the age of 18. And impoverished children have high rates of obesity. 70 to 80% of children become obese as adults, which means that this could lead to high blood pressure, diabetes, asthma, depression, and anxiety. And as a child, being severely overweight can inhibit the child's school performance, and they're known to miss like 4 times as much school, suffer from depression and anxiety, and isolation from their peers. So the school food program that we know in its earliest incarnation was when it was available in the United States in 1853 with the help of the Children's Aid Society of New York. And in 1932 and 1933, federal aid through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation and the Commodity Donation Program added more to feeding this into schools with the help with various organizations like the YPA and the NYA. Then in 1937, about 15 states had passed laws that incorporated lunchrooms in their schools. And World War II caused a little bit of rift because you lost funding because you were funding a war, but the public laws could continue to pass. But in 1946, the government decided to pass the National School Lunch Act, which basically made healthy eating more mandatory than law within our schools. And in 1966, there was the Children's Nutrition Act that was passed to add more funding to subsidize for low-income students, add milk to develop breakfast programs. And then, there were like ebb and flows throughout the way up until the 21st century, where the Child Nutrition and the WIC Reauthorization Act of 2004, and one of the main components of that was that it required local education agencies to develop a wellness policy to combat obesity. And then in 2010, there was a Healthy, Hungry, Free Kids Act. And this act authorized funding, set policies, not only in the national lunch programs, but also for the school breakfast programs, the special nutrition program for women, infant, and children, which is WIC, and summer food service programs, and child and adult food programs. And they further looked at more healthy ways to develop the school wellness policy. The local school wellness policy was created to promote student wellness, prevent and reduce childhood obesity, and ensure that the school meal nutrition guidelines meet minimum standards. All school districts are required to establish an LSWP, and the ones who are in charge of this is the local education agency. The local education agency have the duty of developing a wellness policy that best fits their district. And the LEAs must permit parents, students, representatives, teachers to review and update their LSWP, and required to review and consider evidence-based strategies in determining the health and wellness goals, and provide wellness policy annual progress reports, assess the wellness policies every 3 years, and update or modify the wellness policies as appropriate, and must be transparent. The way in which they can measure those is that the LEAs have a leadership representation who are given responsibilities, and also part of the responsibilities are to ensure that the school complies with the policies, informs and updates the public about what's in their LSWP, and make sure that all requirements are in the LSWP, such as goals of nutrition, promotion, and education, physical activity, and activities that promote wellness. And they must make sure that their schools, meals, and snacks meet the nutrition standards. And so we're going to look at our next policy, and this is something that was done in Somerville, Massachusetts, called Shape Up Somerville. And what it was a community-based intervention to prevent childhood obesity in grades 1 through 3. And when the researchers got there, they evaluated the community and saw that the community already had nutrition and physical activity improvements for children in place, and a new school breakfast program from a new food service director who is a registered dietitian. And the issues that they did discover within their study is that the cafeterias offered processed foods, And though there were state and government food regulations, there was not a school policy that government food services or physical activity. And 44% of the children in grades 1 through 3 were either overweight or at risk of being overweight. So what it was a multifaceted campaign, and as you can see, it's a whole lot here, and I'm not going to go through everything here, but they did have like a plan was to increase the fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and low dairy food for the school menu, remove high sugar, high fat foods, do like a 30-minute nutrition and physical activity lessons, do a healthy eating active time club for a after school program, and stage family events. In order to strengthen the foundation and make changes, the researchers met with the superintendent's assistant superintendent and members of school committee, principals, city leaders, and local nutritionists. A community campaign to generate a buzz and get everyone aware of the Shape Up program. And they added 30-minute nutritional wellness instructions to the curriculum. As for the results of that study, the program reduced approximately 1 pound of weight over 8 months for the children in the intervention, and children gained approximately 1 pound in the control. Changes were made in the schools and kitchen, and the community still uses many of the tools established in this study, such as intramural sports for children, fitness buddy programs, continued participation with the restaurants, 5K family fitness continued, and they wanted to extend a bike path and have the students develop healthy lifestyles that last into adulthood. For our next policy is the alternative approach, which is what the work that we did with the University of Oklahoma in the program was called FRESH. And what it was a larger project, and they made use of the school food programs that were already there. What they had was a universal breakfast program and lunch program and after school meal program. And we had our RDs go in to look at the food, evaluate what's could be some more healthier options to make and still use what's in the menus, but kind of make slight changes to them so that we can have these healthy options. And then they've developed a curriculum to learn about healthy eating habits, the reason for eating healthy, and understanding the need for healthy foods. And then they had a school gardening curriculum consisting of 15 weekly interactive workshops for each semester using small raised plant beds with greenhouses if needed. And curriculum included workshops on garden, healthy eating, cooking, self-efficacy, and weekly gardening sessions. And they also brought in the family. So once a month there was workshops for family to teach about food, healthy eating, cooking, and things like that. And there was also an online curriculum that taught about raising healthy kids. So it talked about everything like how to discipline the kid, praising the kid, foods to feed and foods not to feed, and so on and so forth. And there's also a gardener that was available throughout the year to work part-time and maintain the garden and work with the students and support them as needed until they developed the necessary skills and confidence to successfully manage the garden. And so basically this is what it looked like. It was weekly classroom activities with an introductory activity, a sensory explanation, and cooking in the classrooms, and then a take-home family kit, and then targeted vegetables of tomatoes, bell peppers, spinach, squash, and butter beans and carrots, with repeated exposure using 3 themes: explore, sprout, and harvest. So in that weekly classroom activity, or the introductory is talking about the vegetables and explaining what they are and their significance and why they're healthy and so on and so forth. Doing a sensory exploration was like feel, taste, smell, and look. So you look and see if the plant is ripe yet and ready to eat. And then they were cooking in the classrooms where they were taught to cook a meal and working with adult supervision. And these were in small classes, so it was easier to do. And the classes were pre-K through first grade. And then they were going to take home family kit, which was actually a way of impoverished children have a hard time eating or finding nutritional food. This was a subtle way of getting food to everyone to go and take home their meal kits to have something to eat and something to do with their family, to cook with their family. And so then the repeated exposure part was kind of talking about doing an exploration of the like say the tomato. You explore, you talk about what it is, where it comes from, doing the sensory exploration and all that. And then talk about the sprouting, so they'll plant the food and we watch it as it plants and grows, and then when it's ready to be picked, we do a harvesting. And so we do that with each and every one of the vegetables. And so the components of this policy was basically a policy environmental interaction, which was the farm to school healthy menu, and then establishing of a farm to school protocol, and then installments of garden beds at all the schools. And then on the community school level, there was the monthly healthy parent workshops and establishments of food policy councils, which where we got the people for the community, government people, teachers, superintendents, principals, and parents of the students, and anyone who was interested. And some of them were even cooks. And so there was also cook training, and then there was the classroom curriculum. And then for the family individual, there was the weekly online healthy family workshops. And in those workshops, each week they had a goal setting. So like saying, like this week, I will praise my child. And so the LSWP was basically a general outline to help districts decide what would be best for them. And there was a difference between 2004 and 2010, and that 2010 had evidence-based practices to help schools find the best practices for creating a policy for their district. And they created a basics of minimum requirements. And even though a minimum is not always good, sometimes it's necessary because some schools don't have the capacity to do above and beyond. And to Shape Up Summerville, the pros were that they were very good and thorough. The strengths are that the school took advantage of researchers who were community-minded, and they incorporated community and the school leadership and developed off what was already there, and marketing helped, and then they had multiple goals. And then the cons were that there could have been problems with the research strategy, and the research team could leave, and so what would happen then, because a lot of times there's these flyby researchers who come in, do an intervention and leave the community without the capacity to continue on, or to have given the empowerment where, and then the other thing happens, like when enthusiasm dissipates, then what happens? The pros on the innovative policies that much like the other one, they had a lot of moving parts. Started as an intervention research. The stakeholders were brought to the table early on in the process, and researchers listened to proposed ideas, took them into account, and modified the research as the community had recommended. And the community seemed to have more enthusiasm overall. So some of the cons were that the enthusiasm could dissipate, and because it's grant funded, will the infrastructure remain if the funding isn't there? And would these communities be able to get funding to continue this on? Gardens demand a lot of upkeep. Will there be someone there to continue the maintenance? So there's a lot of things up in the air to deal with once the research ends. And for the implementation, the idea is to kind of combine the best of all these things. And what you do is you begin in the summer if possible, or even a year before. And I think with the Fresh program, it took a year and a half as we met with people, introduced ourselves to people, and got to know the community and become a part of the community. So you begin with the community. You bring in the stakeholders, the gatekeepers, the students and families, and especially bring families from various cultures to discover ways to incorporate cultural perspectives and cultural foods. And bringing in health advisors is also helpful, and if possible, bring from the communities a nutritionist, RDs, cooks, and teachers. And seek various grants throughout the process, and find researchers who have similar goals, and look at what's already in place, how you can improve it, and where to fill in the needs that aren't there. And then look at how you can change the school meals without doing the complete overhaul, because the cooks hate that. And develop and prepare the curriculum. If needed, make sure the child gets a 30-minute of physical activity once a day, because physical activity is very important. As we said, the mind and the body are the things that help make our students academically strong. To use marketing, because the marketing helps prepare the rest of the community. You can send out newsletters and make use of the school website. And when school starts, the gardening curriculum can begin. You incorporate the monthly teachings to the families, have the physical activity planned out, and hopefully have a good year. And the evaluation would be less complicated because you use the LSWP, which has an evaluation component set in it and is established by the district. And using researchers can develop data to evaluate. And what is best practices to do an evaluation at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year. And the evaluations techniques you can use are demographics, looking at the BMI of the students and the parents, and develop questionnaires to evaluate like foods that are liked or disliked, what works, what doesn't, and whether the foods were eaten or taken home, knowledge of the foods, motivation for students and families to start gardens or continue using recipes, and questions that discuss hunger. And then you can also do like a plate waste evaluation or something similar to see how much was or wasn't eaten, and discuss what parents would work and what doesn't. And you do a willingness to try scale, which is basically gives a kid a chance to try the food several times before they decide whether they like it or not. That's it. And these are the references. Thanks a lot, and take care.